Tom, let's talk about Michigan for a minute.
I have to work.
There's so many questions surrounding what Michigan is actually going to look like this season. I think so much of it begins with Bryce Underwood, the star freshman quarterback. Is he going to be the guy? I don't know at this point in time if Michigan has established a starter. If they have during this time, feel free to correct me. But you've got Mikey Keene, the veteran transfer from Fresno State. So that's something that Michigan has liked to do in the past. Meanwhile, you have Sharon Moore at a head coach who's going to be in a situation where he's missing weeks 3 and 4, and then another game that he's going to have to miss due to the recent NCAA sanctions. Postseason, $20 million fine coming up this season and next season. So Michigan's just dealing with a lot this year. Here's the reason I think for positivity in general for Michigan. The team that they fielded and dog walked Alabama's ones in a bowl game last year should encourage Wolverine fans. Now, are they going to do anything earth-shattering this year? No, I expect them to be hovering around 8 and 4, but defensively, Wink Martindale, a defensive coordinator, I like the continuity there, and I like the pieces that they put on the field last year. Again, that Alabama game was mostly Michigan's 2s and 3s, especially on defense. So seeing Rayshawn Benny, Trey Williams, Trey Pierce, Derek Moore, Jayshawn Barham, I love his game. He is one of the next great linebackers in the history of Michigan football. Ernest Hausman, TJ Guy. I mean, like, there's so much talent on that front 7, front 8, whatever you want to call it, for Michigan football. I'm very encouraged by what they can do on that front. And I think they're going to need to rely on their defense, because the overarching question on the offense is, okay, if Bryce Underwood or Mikey Keene, whoever is the starter, well, who the hell are they throwing the ball to? Because there's nobody in this wide receiver core that should scare virtually anyone in the Big Ten, let alone nationally. There's going to be, that bottom third of the Big Ten that's not going to be able to keep up with some of these kids. But at the same time, it's going to be kind of old school Michigan football. Run the ball, work behind a very strong, big, physical, talented offensive line, and you know what you're going to get in Justice Haynes. I think that's a really nice addition out of the portal. I really like that one within the conference. But it is going to be a situation where I think it's going to look probably closer to what J.J. McCarthy was and what that offense felt like. Is, yes, you'd like it if you had a Roman Wilson, somebody like that, like just a security blanket, not a game breaker by any means. But I have been consistently impressed with what Michigan has done with the tight end position. So I feel like Michigan, if they lean on the running game, as always, if you're going to be more quarterback run focused with Bryce Underwood, that's going to at least give you some options, some misdirection, and change of pace within the offense. So I think that's encouraging. But Michigan, I don't know, this is just going to be a challenging year. But even at the same time, I look at their schedule and it's not something that's, it's relatively favorable in the grand scheme of things. And you do have Washington there at home in the middle of October. You're going to have, of course, Ohio State at the end of the year. There's a lot of winnable games on the schedule. But again, this is a team that we're really not going to understand until the middle of October, and that Washington game will be a great barometer. So I have positive feelings surrounding this Michigan team. I don't think they make the playoff. I think they'll make a decent bowl game, but it's just a myriad of question marks for the Michigan Wolverines.
Dude, I just talked and I was on mute the whole time.
You were on mute the entire time.
I was going to say, what happened to me?
Does Tom not want to talk to me? Like, I just asked
I love you, man. What were you saying? Sorry.
I asked a very straightforward yes or no question, and Tom just was staring at me, and I was like,
I got nothing. Yeah.
Come on, dog. Like, give me an answer.
What was the question?
Do they beat Ohio State to finish the year? That's really the only thing I want to know at this point.
Say it one more time. I'm sorry.
Do they beat Ohio State to finish the year? I guess that's the big question on my mind with Michigan.
No, and I just saw Ohio State named Julian Sand the starting quarterback, and he's going to have trial by fire against Texas. And honestly, no matter who they started, if it was Lincoln Keenholz, it would have been the same situation. That's brutal. At least you get a home game. I think by the end of the year, Ohio State knows exactly who they are, and they have more ability. I like their depth more than I like Michigan's in this situation. And I think, or at least I hope, Ryan Day learned his lesson from last year. And frankly, offensively, there are less reasons to believe that Ohio State could be the team that goes out and is more physical than you and runs the football than there were last year. And Ryan Day made that mistake with Chip Kelly. And now it's Brian Hartline, which you expected to be more of a pass-happy offense. Julian Sand, that slew of wide receivers, tight ends, Jeremiah Smith, et cetera, et cetera. long story short, I like what Ohio State can be by the end of the year, and also probably having more to play for. But granted, they had that same situation last year. So I think going to Michigan will give Ohio State a little bit more motivation. I think this is a really pissed off fan base, and they still, even though they won the national title, they're like, okay, that was more of a consolation prize for some Buckeye fans than really anything, which is astonishing. So I think Ryan Day has to beat Michigan this year. Has to. I don't think he will get fired by any means if he doesn't beat Michigan, but he is still somehow public enemy number one in Columbus, and they won a national title.
I will ask real fast, what are realistic expectations for Bryce Underwood if he is the starter? Because again, you have all the money that's coming on in from the boosters. You have all the NIL deals. You have a quarterback that was supposed to go to LSU until he flipped at the last second.
Right.
But it's also a freshman playing in the Big Ten. He's got some tough road games. He has some very minuscule matchups that could end up really helping or hurting Michigan's case. So in your opinion, what's a winning season that gets the fans to buy into 2026?
To your point, at Oklahoma in September, at Nebraska also back end of September. You host Wisconsin, which I know that's not really the scariest game for some people, but sometimes Wisconsin just drags you down into the trenches. At USC, hosting Washington, and Nicole, I know you love Damon Williams and what they can do. And then you're going to end the year with a pretty favorable schedule with Michigan State, little brother, hosting Purdue, at Northwestern, at Maryland, and then Ohio State goes to Michigan. So there's a lot of favorable things there. I think, unfortunately, those road tests are going to be a problem for them. So again, I see this as an 8-4 team. I think 9-3 is the ceiling, and that really the losable games to me feel like Ohio State, Washington, and I'm going to say, honestly, it could be a toss-up with Oklahoma, Nebraska, or USC. Like any one of those three I could see going not in Michigan's favor. But for Bryce Underwood, you do have to kind of start small if you don't really have that much faith in your wide receivers to create separation, especially against some really good secondaries that exist within the Big Ten and especially in postseason play. So I think Bryce Underwood, if he's a guy who you limit him to 20 passes per game maximum, and you try and run him kind of like a Riley Leonard, almost like 10 to 15 carries a game, you're going to get better production out of your offense, and you're going to protect the deficiencies you potentially have in the passing game. I don't expect those deficiencies, by the way, to come from Bryce Underwood or even from Mikey Keene. I think these guys can move the football through the air. It's just the guys catching it have to be able to get open and do something, and I just don't have a lot of confidence in that. So we'll see who they end up naming as the starter, and they'll have a little bit of time to figure it out, but not that much.
Michigan fans will be mad that you didn't say he was winning the Heisman. Back to A&M.